Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Courtside. I am your host, Andrew Cohen. Courtside is a podcast dedicated to all things sports, with a focus on basketball. In today's episode, I will talk about the Kawhi Leonard trade, as well as Carmelo Anthony's signing with the Houston Rockets. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. The San Antonio Spurs have fleeced the Toronto Raptors. Yes, you heard that correctly. The Spurs fleeced the Toronto Raptors, not the other way around. In the NBA, I am of the belief that the team that gets the best player in a trade automatically wins the trade. For example, the Kyrie trade, Celtics got Kyrie Irving. The Cleveland Cavaliers got Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Brooklyn pick. And it appears the Celtics, at this point at least, got the best player in the draft, best player in the trade. There's one situation in which the team that gets the best player loses the trade. And that is if the player doesn't play for you for more than a season and you don't exceed expectations or meet expectations. The Toronto Raptors now appear to be the second best team in the Eastern Conference. So they should get to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? I mean, they should play, in my opinion, the Boston Celtics are better than them. So Celtics versus Raptors Eastern Conference Finals. That's what the Raptors should be aiming for. Even if they get there, they have to win a couple games. So let's say they go in there and get swept, and then Kawhi Leonard leaves next offseason. Was that really a successful trade? Listen, Toronto, I think, is a bigger market than I think it's given credit for, but I just don't think Kawhi Leonard wants to be there. I think he's going to leave after the season. And there's a couple other things with Toronto where the team was built around DeMar DeRozan. Very few times you see a team trade the player it's built around to build around the player they trade for. Build around a different player. The Celtics, again, come back to the Kyrie trade. They trade Isaiah Thomas was supposedly the centerpiece of that team. They trade him away for Kyrie Irving. Now they're building around Kyrie Irving. They only brought back 4 players from the team Isaiah Thomas was on. So it didn't matter who they were building the team around at that point because everybody was gone. Special relationship, a special bond that I think Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan had that I'm 99% sure won't be replicated between Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard. And, listen, how does he fit with that team? How does he fit into that system? New head coach, new teammates. So I don't think it's going to work out in Toronto necessarily. And I don't think he's going to stay there long term. I think he's looking at the Clippers and the Lakers and saying, I want to be with one of those teams. But now here's how the Spurs won this trade. The 3 other main suitors that were calling up San Antonio trying to get Kawhi Leonard were reportedly the Lakers, the Celtics, and the 76ers. The Celtics were not going to trade any of their 5 best players. No Kyrie, no Gordon Hayward, no Horford, no Jaylen Brown, no Jason Tatum. At that point, why are you trading with the Celtics? For draft picks? The 76ers. No Simmons, no Embiid, which I think is obvious. No Fultz. And what do the 76ers have after that point? Right? They don't really have much young talent outside of those 3 that's even intriguing. And I don't even think Fultz is that intriguing. I wouldn't trade for Fultz if I was the GM of any team in the NBA. And then the Lakers reportedly did not really want to part ways with Kuzma. Didn't really want to part ways with Brandon Ingram. And at that point, why are you going to set up the next dynasty in the NBA to get back young players that won't turn into much, most likely? So they go ahead and they trade for a multiple-time All-Star in DeMar DeRozan. And who really cares about the rest of the deal after that point, right? I mean, a protected draft pick and a young center who maybe turns into something, maybe doesn't. But here's why it's different for San Antonio is they just played this entire past season without Kawhi Leonard. They were the 7th seed in the Western Conference, and now they're going to add DeMar DeRozan. Yeah, they lose Danny Green, which I think is a bigger loss than people are given credit for. But the Spurs just traded Kawhi Leonard for a multi-time All-Star when originally everybody's like, well, they're going to trade for a potential All-Star, a guy that's young now, could be an All-Star in the future. But I also want you guys to keep in mind, Greg Popovich is planning on retiring after the 2019-2020 season. DeRozan at that point will have a player option for 1 more year in his contract, but his contract will be up. So if at that point Spurs say let's blow it up, let's start over, they can. And they're also going to be competitive for the next 2 years with Greg Popovich as their head coach. I think this trade pushes the Spurs back into competition for a top 4 seed in the Western Conference. Right after the Warriors, I think it's a big toss-up. And I'll get into the Houston Rockets later. But it's a pretty big toss-up after the Golden State Warriors as to who's going to finish in that top 4. The Spurs could be there. The Spurs could get to the Western Conference Finals just because they traded for DeMar DeRozan. And I'm not even saying DeRozan's an amazing player. But the Spurs are known for having really good shooting coaches. He already improved his shot last year, his 3-point shot. If he improved it a little bit more and was just way more consistent with it, could you imagine if he was a 35, 36% 3-point shooter? I mean, he would be definitely top 15 player in the league. I don't know if he's there now, but he would definitely be a top 15 player in the league. So the Spurs, you have to look at this as they just essentially added DeMar DeRozan for nothing. Right, yeah, obviously not nothing. You trade away Kawhi Leonard, but it's not like he was going to be of any value to your team if you didn't trade him. You trade Danny Green, again, I think that's a bigger loss than people are giving credit for. I think it's a bigger addition for the Raptors than people are giving credit for. But essentially in this deal, the Spurs traded Danny Green for DeMar DeRozan. Kawhi Leonard wasn't going to play. He wasn't going to give any value to the Spurs. What's the problem with this trade? I hear people saying the Raptors fleece the Spurs. The Raptors win this trade. Not so fast. I would bet you that in the next 2 years, the Spurs have way more success than the Raptors. The Spurs, to me, are with Greg Popovich are always a contender for a deep playoff run. The Raptors, I just don't know. Right? Again, what's the fit there with Kawhi Leonard into that system? You could say the same thing about DeRozan into the Spurs. They did it. I mean, they did it with Aldridge. They fit him in. Why can't they fit in DeRozan? I mean, Greg Popovich is an amazing coach. Amazing. He's one of the best coaches of all time, if not the best coach of all time. So long story short, I think the Spurs get the better end of this deal. I think in 2 years, when Popovich is retired, the Spurs will have had more success than the Toronto Raptors. Again, Spurs fleece the Toronto Raptors. DeMar DeRozan will become a top 15 player under Greg Popovich. Nothing against Dwayne Casey, but Greg Popovich is just on a whole nother level. If there's one move made this entire offseason that sums up a single team and what they've done since the season ended, it's the Houston Rockets signing Carmelo Anthony. I mean, I was shocked when the Oklahoma City Thunder were able to trade him, but immediately when I heard they were going to get rid of him, like, he's going to Houston. Houston's going to end up with him. I mean, again, so far this offseason, they've lost Trevor Ariza, they've lost Luc Mbah a Moute. They can't come to an agreement with Clint Capella, their center. And so now they're going to have to ask guys like Nene and Ryan Anderson and Gerald Green to step up. And they bring in Carmelo Anthony, who I just don't think fits the identity of that team whatsoever. Again, when they lost Trevor Ariza, I was already skeptical because I think he's a bigger part of that team than he's given credit for. They lose Mbah a Moute, who once again was an underrated piece of this team that almost made it to the finals this past year, almost threw off the Warriors. This team's not the team that's going to throw off the Warriors. I hear people, like, at the end of the season, people are like, oh, the Rockets are so close. They're going to come back next year and beat the Warriors. No, they're not. I don't think they end up finishing as a top 4 seed, to be quite honest with you. Again, how many big shots did Trevor Ariza hit? How many big threes? How many times did he step up on defense? Same thing could be said for Mbah a Moute. He vastly improved his offensive game this year. The Rockets are not going to be the team to throw off the Golden State Warriors. They're not even close to it. Carmelo Anthony's just not a winner. And I think there could be some problems in that locker room with Carmelo and the rest of the team. Especially with a situation like James Harden and Carmelo Anthony, 2 guys that want to take the shots. Especially Melo. I mean, Melo will huck up threes and huck up bricks all game if he wants to. But he took a huge dip last year when he was traded to Oklahoma City. He's not even close to the same player he once was. Again, if he was still the player he was during his tenure in New York, this would be a different story, obviously. But he's not even close to an all-star talent level anymore. And the Rockets, I'm not going to say it's a terrible move because I think they had to do something. But they're not the team that's going to beat the Warriors anymore. They're not even close to it. So now, we're going to be relying on teams like the Thunder, maybe the Lakers in the Western Conference. But, again, the Rockets have had a terrible offseason. I think this just sums up everything. But if they got Trevor Ariza back, if they get Mbah a Moute back, and they can come to an agreement with Clint Capella, If all that happened, Carmelo Anthony is not a Houston Rocket today. Carmelo Anthony is a free agent. So, listen, if you're a Houston Rockets fan, I don't think you can be happy about this. Right? I mean, you've lost 2 players, you may lose a third, and you added Carmelo Anthony. So they just don't have the championship DNA anymore. They don't have the defensive identity that they did this past season. Right? Again, like, I know their team's focused on offense, but defensively is why they were so good last year. Is they were able to play well on the defensive end. That's why offensively they could put up big numbers and destroy other teams. Not make it a close game, not make it 120-115, make it 115-90. Like these big deficits at the end of games. So for the Rockets, I'm not saying signing Carmelo Anthony is the end. It's more everything that has led up to this signing that has kind of ruined the Rockets' chances. But this just, I think, perfectly sums up how bad the Rockets' offseason has been. Thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. Join me next time where I will talk about the remaining NBA free agents, among other topics. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I will see you next time.